Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore all things cinema. I want to welcome back to the show Joe Crisafulli, who is a writer, director, producer, editor. He does it all. I think I always say that. But Joe, welcome back. Thanks again for doing this.
Thank you. I'm an okay cook. I don't do it all.
Yeah, he juggles his share of things, that's for sure.
Great to be here, though. Thank you.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for coming back. I'll read a synopsis of Juliet of the Spirits. Visions, memories, and mysticism all help a 40-something-year-old woman to find the strength to leave her cheating husband. This was directed by Federico Fellini. He co-wrote the screenplay with Tullio Pinelli and Ennio that's a hard word to say, Flaiano. I hope I have that right. Starred Giulietta Masina and Sandra Milo and Mario Pisu. Fantastic. Joe, when did you first see this and what did you initially think?
Like so many of the Italian pictures you and I have talked about, like piecemeal over the years. I think even in a class I took on language of cinema, we actually saw like dissected one scene. And maybe like on Italian television or something. But the first time that I really saw it that with any actual mature appreciation was at MoMA, the Museum of the Moving Image, like 23 years ago. And at the time, Fellini, I was very impressionable in regards to work by Fellini. He kind of saw the world and was figuring things out as a man the way I was as a young man. I have to say I feel I grew beyond that at a certain point, and maybe Fellini's work didn't. But I really appreciated it, and I thought it was very interesting that so many of his movies are about his own infidelities. You know, 8.5 towards the end, the climax, he has the monologue, a voiceover, talking about how he wishes he could look into his wife's faithful eyes and be a good Catholic, a good man, a good husband. And now his wife is the lead character.
Right.
I think now I maybe question more than I did then. Did his wife appreciate sort of being a stand-in for him as opposed to whatever she because it's reflective kind of what they were going through in real life, I think. And did she appreciate being a reflection of him and not really expressing where she's coming from? If he's going to go that route, I don't know, but that stands out. The color, obviously, as well. The color is spectacular.
Yeah. Well, this was his first feature film that he did on color. Boccaccio, I always say 60, but it's 70, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Even though it came out in like 62, but yeah, I think it's 70.
Yeah, which is also, I think you're right, which is also a color, but it's like a short film, but also beautiful to look at. This is his first color feature. Well, you said something interesting was that you felt the film was more speaking from his own experience through the Juliet character. That's it. How is that something that from reading about his biography that you felt, or something that was said?
Well, it's mostly conjecture, but I did read over the years that, for instance, they disagreed on what the ending meant.
I read that, yeah.
That he felt she was free and she felt that she was just resigned to being trapped forever or alone. And I did read that at least Sandro Milo, I think he was having an affair with her. But it is conjecture, but I do wonder, because the more I look at the pictures he did from La Dolce Vita on, if you look at the first ones, he really does. It's a departure from kind of La Dolce Vita, certainly 8.5 on, from the earlier stuff, La Strada, I Vitelloni.
Yeah.
Which I don't know that I would call I Vitelloni neorealism, but it was much more tied to the earth in terms of, I think a lot of guys could relate to being in a rinky-dink town, you feel you have a lot to offer, but what's out there, or romantic issues, etc. And then things become surreal and Jungian, certainly from 8.5 on, if not La Dolce Vita on. And I think I realize now, whereas when I was younger, maybe I was that self-absorbed as well. And you're learning things for the first time. You're in college, and the world, you're almost like a baby. You're experiencing things for the first time with a newly adult brain. But now I kind of see these almost as if the characters are entirely separate from their consciousnesses, where they're almost like witnessing something else, like an out-of-body experience, as opposed to being bogged down, like, why do I do this, or whatever. Right. I think Woody Allen's version of Juliet of the Spirits, Alice, is much more like that, where they're contemplating their dialogue, their own neuroses, and it's kind of more drawing themselves in. Why am I like this? What does this mean? Whereas in Juliet of the Spirits and some of the others, well, especially Juliet of the Spirits, there are spirit voices talking to her with seances and whatnot. But they're kind of like witnessing almost the echo of their inner selves. And it's a lot more vague, and they're kind of just wandering through it, maybe not aimlessly, but on thin ice, And so I guess I just felt that maybe it's presumptive that if after seeing so many of his movies like that, that's clearly his voice. If it were really about her, I think she would have more specifically to say instead of as many symbols, so to speak.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I only just first saw this just literally a few months ago for the and I instantly, we're so fortunate now, right? Because it's with the Criterion Channel. It's on the Criterion Channel. This was the restored version from 2015, I believe. But I immediately took to it, and I've noticed that it seems to be discussed less than a lot of his other well-known films, and it's some people's takes on it. I don't quite agree with, which I'm curious what you would think, but we'll get into. But I just absolutely love the film, and I know what you're saying. A lot of it is her being led by the spirits and witnessing things, and what that's doing to her. But what I found so fascinating about it is that she is completely innocent. Here's this person who is married to this man that she's only been with. She's a housewife. They're living in their own world. They're clearly well off. They have servants, and we see her mother and sisters. There's no father. There's the grandfather, and we don't know exactly what happened with the father. And she seems to be the oldest sister. And my impression was that perhaps maybe she had to take care of the younger daughters because the father was gone. I mean, we don't really know, but I was really drawn to her innocence and how her life is basically shattered, and everything that she thought about life, that you get married, you're in love with that person, and everything is bliss. And her worldview is basically shattered by suspecting that her husband, Giorgio, is having an affair, which of course she finds out is true. And what does she do? And what's fascinating is that she doesn't know what to do. She really doesn't know what to do because she's completely innocent. And I have known, and sometimes when I hear people talking about this film, I'm like, I'm not saying it's necessarily an Italian thing, because people can be innocent from all kinds of different cultures and perhaps naive to certain experiences. But from my own experiences and from, women I knew, and even in my own family, there is a real sort of innocence there. And perhaps coming to Canada and feeling like we got to band together and survive, and a fear of the outside world to an extent. And there's a certain innocence there that sort of never goes away. And I've always been drawn to that. So, you know, I just think that she really doesn't know what to do, and so she's being led by these spirits. You know, we see the seance at the beginning. The spirits get in, and the spirit Iris is guiding her, right? And taking her to, well, okay, well, be more like the neighbor who's like sexual and sensual and gorgeous and having like lots of sex. And then, you know, then she tries to go to that spiritual like guru, hermaphrodite, half man, half woman, and person basically blames her for her husband cheating on her. Well, maybe you're not satisfying him, and thank God she wasn't that gullible, because you could tell she's offended. Like, you're saying that this is my fault. But I'm so drawn to people who literally don't know what to do, which we don't really see a lot. And some people usually are trying things, or characters kind of know what to do, even though they have obstacles. Yeah. But she literally doesn't know what to do. And that innocence I could relate to. I've experienced it. I've seen it, of people just almost like a childlike quality of like, this is over my head. You know, I don't know what to do. I don't know if any of those things sort of resonated with you.
Yeah, you know, and being critical of this or any other like Fellini work, I don't want it to be construed that I didn't really appreciate. I really like this picture for different reasons, and you're so right. Even when we were growing up, let alone today in the world of comic book movies and IP, not that they can't be great, people really do need to be spoon-fed character and purpose. You already, 80s and 90s, had that ticking clock with one obstacle after another, and doing is character. When that doesn't have to be that way, there's just as many horrendous movies that are like that as good ones. I would say there's just as many good movies that don't do that as do. Maybe they're independent, maybe they're foreign. But yeah, it's fascinating to see someone feel their way. You know, I can't tell you there are how many people, men and women today, who maybe they're like 35 and younger, and if they see a movie that is lowercase a adult, they're lost, because they're not being spoon-fed who the good guy is, who the bad guy is. They're doing something more complex than just chasing after the shiny thing.
Right.
You know, be it the magic box or the trident or whatever. And so, yeah, that's wonderful. And you saying that really makes me grieve for days that I did not live through, but I was told about it, like in the 60s and 70s, when you had students lining up to see the new Fellini or the new Kurosawa or the new at the single screen. So yeah, that is fantastic. In terms of being innocent, you know, it's fascinating, this dichotomy with, you know, the innocent woman and the man philandering, and she has no choice. Okay, I'm trying not to get anyone in trouble here. Okay, so my wife will say in her culture, she's Dominican. You know, the patriarchy is so set, and toxic patriarchy is thrown around way too freely. And I'm not here to judge, but an aspect of her culture, she'll say, is the philandering, and that women are really helpless, especially if you're in a third world or 2.5 world country where you just don't have as much opportunity to do your own thing. And women have to, let's not crap on the Dominicans. I mean, every culture everywhere, the women are victim to this, traditionally at least. But something that you may notice is women therefore turning their femininity into a resource, or they into a commodity, in that okay, that's the game, they're gonna just go whatever. Well, I'm gonna hold out for this and this. You know what I mean? Maybe they're not going to go out and sleep with everybody like all male mammals have had the freedom to do across the world. But it's an other commodity. Okay, you want a good home, you want a family, you want to marry this. Okay, well, this, and that. And whereas in Italy, I think there's a lot more philandering, frankly, with prostitutes, and not another woman that can be a homewrecker. And it is something, again, I think that if it were purely, truly from her point of view, I do think it would be a little less vague. I think she would have a lot to say about the matter. And maybe she doesn't know what to do, but I feel that she would definitely have a lot to get off her chest, as opposed to the luxury of, oh, she goes here and tries to figure it out, or experiences some guru, goes here, tries to figure it out. And to me, that just speaks more of a man who's trying to figure it out and is maybe failing at that. But I do very much appreciate that cinema. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Be more like the neighbor who has a love nest in a treehouse. Like literally. What when you said you were kind of at odds with what some other people have said about it, what are some of the things that you heard?
Other, critics or podcasters, they see. I think some people sometimes think that Fellini is necessarily saying something, like giving some kind of a message. And even he said, my films pose questions. They don't give answers. And I think it's a mistake to think that he's saying that, oh well, Juliet would be better off if she was just like the neighbor, or that they think that it's not fair that he cut off the opportunity for her to also have her affairs, because when she's about to have an affair with that guy at the villa next door, she's about to sleep with him, and then of course I love that moment where she sees the fire and Kifai, what are you doing? And that's the religious guilt comes in, and the sin, and she stops herself. And so some people felt, well, there's a double standard at play, because he's saying it's okay for the men to have affairs but not the women. But I don't see that. I don't think he's saying that at all. I don't think he's saying, oh, that anything is okay. I think he's just showing how this woman is reacting to this opportunity, and and that she has this opportunity to sleep with this young guy. But if anything, it's more of a compliment that she has more of a sense of moral integrity than maybe Guido in 8.5 or her husband Giorgio in this film, because they will, easily go and cheat. But has more of a moral center to say, well, this is wrong. It's against her faith as well, being Catholic. So she doesn't do it because she thinks it's a sin. And so to me, I don't think he's denying her that. If anything, he's poking fun at the church to think that they make people feel that way. But if anything, it's, you can decide. Do you think that she should have done that? Do you think that would have been better for her? It's really up to you, but I'm just really watching a character, how she takes to things. I'm not seeing anything double standard, or that he's saying she should be like Sandra Milo's character. I just think that this is a very religious person, a very innocent person whose life has been shattered, and she's trying to figure out what to do. And this is just how she feels about it. I don't think he's saying that Milo is better off, because if anything, even though she's so beautiful and sexy and sensual, he also kind of portrays that villa as kind of freaky. I mean, they got the beehive tiles, the sex slide. After they have sex, they jump into the pool. Outside, there's statues of hawks with breasts. I mean, he's not making that look like the greatest orgy. He's making it look sensual yet freaky.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with like what you said, that it could almost be a compliment. It reminded me of Moonstruck, the mom in Moonstruck, who was named John Mahoney, that amazing British actor that sounds perfectly American. He wants to take her out, and she'll take a walk, but she won't go inside because she says, I know who I am.
Right.
And yeah, I think that's great. The alternative to you doing me wrong is not to be like you, and I thought very true. And something you said about innocence too, I wonder how it would be if someone other than Giulietta Masina played the role. There's something about her face and her behavior that to me, I've always thought she's been evocative of silent film.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like she and Johnny Depp are the two modern actors that are most evocative of silent film. And I don't mean that to be necessarily like, oh, they pantomime and everything, but she's able to bring this energy and this vibe and inhabit the space in such a way. And you look at her face, it's kind of like when you think the Knights of Cabiria, that she's a prostitute. She seems like you want to take her home, like cuddle,
Yeah.
And I wonder what it would be like. Mia Farrow plays the character in Woody Allen's version, Alice, and she does have the affair, and she's not better off for it, and she realizes that.
Right.
So yeah, I wonder what he's saying about his wife. Obviously, I guess we don't know if she actually did or not. But I thought that was very poignant. I thought that was stronger.
Yeah, me too.
And to just do it because that's easy.
Absolutely. And I don't know what it is. It's like this. There's certain. Another criticism is like, well, if this is the female version of 8.5, in 8.5, Guido, because he had affairs and more of a larger past, there was more to explore with him. But okay, yeah, and I love 8.5 is one of my favorite movies, but I don't. Why is it not interesting just because she doesn't? I mean, it seems as though people do not like. And I'm not saying everybody, but just, my impression of some reviews is that they just don't like people who are sort of innocent and lack experience and don't know what to do. It's almost, it reminds me of the film Wanda, Barbara Loden's Wanda, which is kind of similar in the sense that this woman is unhappy, but she's just wandering around and gets, into the bad crowd and stuff, but she really doesn't know what to do. And I remember reviewing that with someone. It was my co-host at the time who started the channel. He hated the movie. I mean, passionately hated the movie and that was part of it. And I just thought, why am I so drawn to that? I find that fascinating. Again, maybe because I sort of know people like that. And there's just that sense of innocence, even though you could be an adult, but you could be, in some ways very naive and childlike. I think that's something we really don't see enough.
Well, like Tom Cruise, Eyes Wide Shut, he's wandering.
Yeah, good point.
His wife was faithful, but she wanted to cheat and didn't, and he can't get that out of his mind, and he's wandering around.
Yes, right. But yet that's a masterpiece. But if a woman, for some reason, people can't accept women in those, I'm like, why?
Yeah, I find post women's lib issues fascinating only because, I grew up a very strong woman in my house as my mom. There's no way I'm gonna be with someone who's not a strong woman. It's in my DNA. And my point of view is, things need to be equal. Are women equal to men or not? Obviously they are. They should have, I'm an egalitarian. And now I think we're at a place where I think a lot of young people, even young women, take a lot of that for granted. And I think we kind of double talk and double guess ourselves. Is it anti-feminist that she's wandering around not knowing what to do? Is it anti-feminist that she chooses not to have the affair? Or is it something that emboldens her that, no, I'm stronger than my man? and that's
that's how I saw it.
you know? And I think we should be open to all that. I've never looked at a movie and said, well, what I see on screen is not what I like in my own life. Therefore, I think I hate the movie.
Right.
That's never been the case for me. I do not like golf at all. I think Tin Cup's a terrific picture. And I think that's what people, empathy, being able
Right.
to appreciate it. But hey, people have a fair reaction. It's your fair reaction if you hated her for some reason. But conversation, discussion, that's what's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But there seems to be this sort of like allergy to housewives, or and unless the film is exploring how oppressive that might be. But I mean, I don't know. I have conflicting feelings about. I mean, what I mean, sure, it can be, and certainly throughout history, it has been. But for someone who is, I mean, are we sort of like, is that experience just absolutely awful, or why can't we just look at someone like that? I don't really. I don't really get that. I don't get why that's so. People have such a hard time with that. Well, in a way, I get it. Maybe because they understandably, that's women, they want to see people working and have careers and different issues, but and so that wants to be left behind. But hey, there are housewives, right? I mean, it's a reality. Then why not have a story about it?
I recently read a think piece someone wrote about how Glenn Close's character in Fatal Attraction was misunderstood, or the wronged person, and how really it was the whole movie was an example of toxic patriarchy and stuff. You could look in the weeds for whole sorts of stuff, but people cheat. You can unpack it for each individual person as much as you want. But there's also such a thing as someone who's like a psycho. Now, maybe there's legitimate mental reasons for that. Doesn't legitimize her actions, but sometimes you're just dealing with a psycho, crazy person, and you don't have to read into the feminism or everything you're saying. Really makes me appreciate Lena Wertmuller all the more, because she's a woman writing from a woman's point of view, but she writes men in a way where she clearly respects them as individuals, right, as men. She doesn't point a finger. She doesn't mock men's needs, even if their needs can crap on women. She also is willing to concede that women may say they want things one way, but they really want it, how we kind of all want the same thing. And it's all about the different dance we both do and the reconciliation over that. And that's someone who is truly, I think, a feminist, a humanist. Right. And it's not all or nothing. Right. Which, again, I think Fellini maybe could have used a little bit more of that if this is supposed to be a story about her. But I'm with you. Like, why can't she just? They were happy. This is their marriage.
Yeah.
And what do you do when your husband's infidelity blows that up?
Right.
That's totally legitimate.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's completely how I saw it. Then it's interesting because when I first saw it, I wasn't thinking about 8.5 as much, but again, the story is so different in a lot of ways, but the journey is similar, and of course with Juliet, just like Guido, we have the flashbacks, and then we have some people looking for advice from others. I mean, Guido goes to the church. He doesn't like what they're saying, and other people. She's going to the neighbor and to the spiritual guru and the psychiatrist and stuff. And then of course we get the surreal elements of spirits and such, and we have that in 8.5 as well. And both have hopeful endings to an extent. Depending on how people look at it. Some people don't think perhaps either are hopeful, but we'll get into that. But yeah, I mean, right away, it's so 8.5. Like all those party guests are just like coming at her. It's it's her POV as the camera follows each character. Almost, it feels like they're just harassing the camera. Also starts where we don't see her face, like Guido, and she's trying on all these wigs, which tells me there's an insecurity there. She can't really, really be herself. But I also found it fascinating, the relationship with her family, because Giulietta Masina is short, and I think he intentionally got all these tall people around her to because it works for the character because she feels so small. But we have one of the sisters is like an actor, and she's like very glamorous looking, very beautiful. I mean, the mother, like, they're all very glammed up, and they even say, the mother, says to her, "Why don't you wear some makeup?" And so, no wonder she thinks that she should be the neighbor, because she's being made to feel that everything's about, well, I'm only going to be valued if I'm, glamorous or gorgeous. And she's turning to TV. I mean, that's another thing for advice. And she's watching these crazy programs of like women talking about if you do a wink like this over and over again, like, you'll look better. It's just like insane. And she's almost she's trying it. You see her doing it. She's like blinking to thinking, and just that feeding of that insecurity from the family, of these three women. Even though one of them seems to be more helpful when she begins to investigate, go to the detective to investigate whether her husband's actually cheating. But I found that family dynamic really interesting. I don't know. How did you feel just about that part of the film?
Yeah, for sure. In Fellini's movies, he's very big on visually stunning characters or dichotomies of characters. If he'll have one person who's 7 feet tall walking with a dwarf,
Right.
And that's fascinating.
Right.
I do, especially from this movie on in Fellini's body of work. The older I get, the more I'm just astonished that he didn't do all sorts of hallucinogenic drugs. And not that you have to, you can be a creative person, but I kind of feel like, people make such a thing out of the fact that he played music on his sets. The Italian directors didn't record for sound. And so you literally, and also his use of camera, you do see the camera maybe tracking with people that are walking with it, and someone comes in the foreground, and it's almost like a melodic sort of dance that he's doing, more and more about the circus, whereas La Strada, you had a circus type of thing, but it's more feet to the ground, feet to the earth, neorealist type of thing. And I think these dynamics, sort of like Jungian archetypes, contrary physicality of characters, all these things play so much more, have so much more of a place in Fellini's work as he gets older. Some people would say he loses himself in that. I was shocked to read that at this time he tried LSD and was very disappointed. But
I read that.
I don't know if this specifically addresses your question. I mean, it all is kind of my response to what I'm noticing too, as the differences between her and her sisters and her mom. I have a cousin who, I don't know how many years ago, he did ayahuasca for the first time, and he said, yes, it makes you sick, but it's like his brain was a supercomputer, and he felt closer to God, he felt closer to his true nature, but he had to go kind of nuts and sick on that trip for you to get that. And I kind of feel like Fellini goes on that trip repeatedly as his career progressed, but not all the way, and never became better because of that. And in terms of what the differences of height or stature, I mean, is he saying, is the presumption that Giulietta Masina is not attractive, is not of magnanimous stature? I guess whoever financed it wanted a bigger star who was more of a woman, whatever that is. But I think there's something, not wholesome isn't the word, something of the earth and of our better selves in her face, whatever it is, that makes you relate. And maybe if you're looking at these monoliths of women in her life that she grew up with. In contrast to that, I don't know what he's trying to say, that she necessarily is weaker because she looks smaller, but I think it speaks loudly to her character that she doesn't need to be this goddess type of woman to know.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
You know, I'm going to get out of this because I don't want to sleep with this guy, or whatever it is, you know,
Right.
whether she's walking out at the end trapped, or whether she's walking out at the end free, she can walk alone. Whereas
Right.
Marcello in La Dolce Vita goes back into the forest, into the Bacchanalia. Guido, there's the circle of dances, you know, he dances with his demons, but he can't walk alone. Clearly, she can walk alone.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, beautifully said. And I love what she, you know, that moment, even when in the that one surreal fantasy where she, you know, stands up to her mother when she's trying to open that closet, and her mother's like, "Don't open it." And of course, it's it's her as a little girl on a stake, and she unties it, and it's such a touching moment, you know, and she hugs the herself basically. And of course, you know, just we could set that up a little bit, was one of the flashbacks is her doing this play, and you know, it's some Christian allegory or something, and she plays this person who gets sentenced to death, and they literally put her on a stake, and they hang her up, and they hang her, and that, you know, the grandfather, who was like the outside of her husband, was like the only man that she really loved, and he's like a pole that they would put her up that high on a stake, and he stops the show and everything. And, you know, it's funny because her mother's even watching, and everyone seems okay with it, but this one guy. But I love that metaphor because it's almost as though her whole life she has been on that stake, you know, and that people put her there, whether it's her husband to keep her in her place, or her family making her feel a certain way. And now she's finally, you know, ripping herself right out of it, which I thought was such a power. Like, you know, I mean, how can you, you know, I can understand people having certain problems with the film, but to me, she is so much stronger than, like you had said, Guido, perhaps. I mean, in a way, you could even interpret that what Guido comes up with at the end of 8.5 is his own delusion. You know, and again, that's one of my favorite movies, but there's a certain strength she has here. And if, you know, that's why I just think it's a mistake to think that he's necessarily saying anything. I think at most he's saying that the best thing that can happen for her right now is that she can begin to breathe, which is what the psychiatrist says to her. And I think that was the best advice she got, was that if your husband leaves you, you can breathe.
and, you know, if you notice, in that play of martyrdom from when she was a child, the man who saves her from that, the only other man in her life, her grandfather, is the one that flew away with an actress or whatever it was, a visiting performer actress.
Yeah, that he ran off with.
Yeah, and the funny thing that he says towards the end about that plane is that something he said, that the plane can't go anywhere, but it has.
Yeah.
You know, it's that sort of vague / meaningful conundrum she's in. You're right. Is she allowed to breathe? Can she be free? But she's still in this encapsulated circumstance of who is she? She's someone who loved her husband, is faithful to her husband, but that's really not going to fly, right? Because what good is that going to do her? And it's that conundrum. And personally, I just feel that she would have a more specific point of view if say she were a writer. And something you notice in Fellini too, from maybe here on, or maybe 8.5 on, but even when he has these flashbacks, say to the school or a church, that is not what a school looked like or what a church looked like. These are fantastical sets. And I feel like he just kind of is less and less tethered to the earth as his movies go on. One thing I think that really worked for Armacord, which was maybe the only movie after this that got universal acclaim. I think he won his last Oscar for Armacord, maybe. is that it takes place in a specific place, like a town, and he's so married to that town. There are fantastical scenes, the kid dreams he's in a Grand Prix type of thing, or Formula One type of thing. But it's so tied to that town and that place.
Right.
He doesn't quite leave the earth as much.
Right.
And I think that my only knock is, I think for someone that is tethered to an anchor as much as she is, maybe it could have used more to counterbalance the abstractness and whatnot, more to tether her to what she really is. But it doesn't have to be the movie I would have made,
Right. Yeah, no, I see what you mean. And you brought up a good point, which I hadn't thought of, was that, Guido at the end of 8.5 is sort of dancing with his demons, whereas you see the demons here are literally banished. I love that image where they're just all like on this big.
Yeah, it's like,
yeah, and then she just. But what's even like, he really puts, what I love about it is that he really puts you through her feelings and torture from going to these various places. And even though she gets them to leave, then they all start to come back, because she goes, she goes, go away, and then they start to leave. But of course it isn't until she actually goes and takes herself as a little girl off the stake that they finally go. But I love that, because it's never that simple, right? We can't just banish our demons, right? It's they can always be there, even though maybe we've come to terms with them to an extent. But she goes back into her house and she's alone, and then her husband leaves once again. The guy's always coming and going, and she just begins to cry. And that's when the suicidal thoughts come, from her cousin Laura, who had committed suicide, and she says, just kill yourself. That's the answer. And again, thank God she doesn't do it. And she sees like these they look like SS officers to me, Nazis. And I wondered why he did that. I guess now this is the first time she's thinking of suicide. So perhaps, when she thinks of death, she thinks about the war. Was I mean, we don't see that, but was maybe my connection there. I don't necessarily think we have to make sense of all the images, because as he wrote down his dreams in his dream journal, and then he put them where he felt that they were appropriate. So I think it's a mistake, and maybe a headache to try to like piece together. Some of them are obvious, but some of them are like, what the hell, what is this? Even though they seem to fit.
Oh, I mean. Now, it's not from his imagination, but I mean, Satyricon, for God's sake. Yeah, what is this really out?
Yeah, that one is really, that one's really out there in that way.
Yeah, that was,
69.
That was his next one, I think.
Yes. Yeah.
Something that struck me as you were mentioning some of those things, it really is sort of a classic Catholic Christian conundrum. When whether it's that, the suffering she goes through, possible suicide, Charlie in Mean Streets always has to burn his hand.
Good point.
It's the fact that Jesus was murdered, right? He was killed, which is a bad thing, except it's the only thing that makes the point of Christianity. If he doesn't die, it is the fulfillment of his destiny, which also Last Temptation of the Christ shows so poignantly at the end, where he is tempted to have all the things of a normal man. He has to die, whether you blame the Romans or the Jews, Judas, but you know what? All that had to happen for our salvation.
Right.
It's this, is it really that bad, or do I just have to suffer it? How do you reconcile that as a human being? You talk about Catholic guilt, and it's funny, in Woody Allen's version of this, he brings up too many times Catholicism, like making fun of Catholics. Not that you can't have a sense of humor, but okay, I've heard this joke like 4 or 5 times in this movie, and you realize that's baked in there, that you can suffer. The Jews are still waiting for their savior. I don't know that Muhammad suffered. He was victorious against his enemies. Our guy suffered, and so the suffering's necessary, and it's good if I sacrifice, but my wife is suffering because of me. So would she not be as good if she didn't have to suffer? It's this crazy conundrum, catch 22.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. It's, I mean, his films they're so complex and layered that you could talk about them endlessly. I mean, we could talk about whether the affairs would have been good for her for hours. I mean, there's because even me, I'm thinking, yes, do it. And then when the she sees the fire and she stops, you think to yourself, oh no, oh yeah, it's her Catholicism stopping her. But then at the same time, just because you have sex with a stranger, is that gonna be so liberating necessarily? Or maybe, but
I wonder how much of this is you and me in 2024 contemplating these things, as opposed to 1965, where things were just more rigorous. I mean, the
right.
church had more. I mean, look, the church hasn't had any hard power for 150 years, but Vatican II had just ended. The mass was no longer in Latin. The priest had to do it facing people, not with his back towards them. John the 23rd is the Pope who said, I want to open the doors and the windows so that we may see out of the church and the people may see in. And we live in all this 21st century liberal society. And I wonder what it was like then for critics,
Right.
Yeah, she did the right thing, not cheating on
Right.
him, or it's Catholic, not going to do that. Whereas today we're wondering, I'm sure there is a circumstance where cheating might do her good if she's with a no good guy that doesn't give a rat's ass, run around the 24-year-old.
Right.
It's so important that that's her choice to make, not the audience's. And she clearly felt, this is not who I am.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly it. Yeah.
Maybe I would have. I really like the movie. I love Fellini's use of camera with blocking.
Oh, yeah.
I love the use of color. I would have maybe liked to seen a story that balances it out more in that sense. Her choice. Well, what does her choice mean, as opposed to being lost? But I can't disagree with all the things you're saying. It's refreshing. Right. It's wonderful to see someone figuring it out.
Yes.
And
yeah. I mean, right. It's even her, the spirit of her dead cousin Laura says, everything is gray here. And if, even though it's very colorful, but her place it's very gray. I mean, it's gray, white. A lot of the color comes from the villa, with the leaves and the spring and the fall.
Oh, and that neighbor, the colors, like, it's so not realistic.
Right. Yes. No.
Clothing. It's really out there.
Yeah, and to have a slide go into a pool from a bedroom, I love.
And the love treehouse, all this stuff.
Yeah, the treehouse. I love the shot where she leaves because she knows those two guys clearly are coming for like an orgy.
Another instance where, as soon as she was looking forward, and I thought that was telling too. She looked, I have someone I can confide in these things with, I guess. But as soon as she thinks that's what's going to happen, the woman invites the two guys up, and she immediately says, "Okay, well, I'm tired. I'm going to go home."
Yeah, she gets uncomfortable. But I love that POV when she looks back, and now we see Sandra Milo just in her almost naked, and the guy's slowly descending, and she kind of that was a perfect POV of like almost of you can feel how that is so uncomfortable for her and not right from her.
It's like a gladiator shot, almost like up at Sandra Milo looking down on these two guys coming up. Like, but she owns her life in another way. I mean, her fiance is this 65-year-old guy who might be somewhat mystic or whatever, but she has her boyfriends, and it's that reminded me of, I forget what, if it's Annie Hall, where Woody Allen's trying to figure out what makes a good relationship. We're suffering, we care about each other. Why can't we just pinpoint what will make a relationship work? And he stops this young, beautiful couple on the street. What makes your relationship work? And it's that, oh, we're both totally shallow people. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so the neighbor, maybe the neighbor has just as much agency, but she doesn't know what she does. She doesn't realize all she could have if she had, I mean, I hate to say like a pair of balls, but if she had fortitude and more character and presence of self to not just, sleep with everybody and have slide. But again, maybe that's who she is, and that's good.
Right. Right.
Which speaks all the more to Giulietta's choice to not do that.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly how I saw it, and it almost seems like it's a brothel, but then it's not, because she's like telling one woman, like, she's like, "Oh, you're such a whore," and all this stuff. But then we see that one sequence where it's a POV shot from Juliet as she's walking through, and the women are like kissing various men, but the men look like lifeless, and then they're making like when the women look at the camera, they're making like horse noises. I'm like,
it's like they're making out with Weekend at Bernie's or something. Yeah, I wonder what that. You know what? Maybe again, I wish Fellini were here. Maybe he's making a comment that the knock on men, and there's plenty of men that support this idea, is that they just fuck like rabbits. That no matter what it is, they're always after that for that, and women are more metaphysical. Maybe the comment he's making is that, you can sleep with as many as you want. It's going to be diminishing returns to the point where you're essentially a corpse going through the motions. And whereas it's these women in this scene you're talking about who make the choice to go out and do what they're going to do, which is not the norm for women. And so they're alive and saying, what do you want?
Right.
I don't know,
Yeah,
maybe.
it could be interpreted in so many ways. I also just saw it as that he's making that all seem very, very sexy, but then there's something just a little off about it all, right? So it kind of throws the audience, because it's easy to say, oh, be like this beautiful Sandra Milo, but then everything in that villa is just a little odd, a little, like with that one woman who tried to kill herself over a man. And even, she's very beautiful, but she looks like insane. Like she looks insane, right? Like she's like, her eyes are like bugged out, and she's clearly something wrong with her. And so everything, he's just throwing you off ever so slightly, but then I don't know how, he's such a genius that he balances such a serious story with this blend of humor, and it all seems to work, and a lot of the moments I was laughing, particularly that like spiritual guru person and who's making all these weird noises, and then his followers are following with these strange sounds, and that one woman, as they're watching, as they take her or him away, and then that woman says, "Yeah, isn't that amazing? That the same thing happened in Stockholm." I'm like, yeah, because it's a show.
Yeah, and how amazing is it that that's 1965. You have limited media, and today it's like, if you look on Instagram or whatever, all these people selling wellness, spirituality, candles, whatever it is, they're essentially selling a behavior and a way of life that originally was done by essentially hermits, people doing it in private on their own. And that's been commodified. That's become a commodity that people are trying to sell as their wares. And I guess that's what he's saying also. If that's what it was like then, I mean, like maybe back then you had to live in Rome or LA or something to be that kind of loopy. Not that, no, maybe not loopy, but that in touch with coloring outside the box. But maybe that was a scam. What on earth do we have now? It's we swim in every day.
Absolutely. I actually, it hasn't happened in quite a while, but where I work part-time, at a live performance venue. They had, it reminded me of that, but they had like a 2-day conference of people like that. These like offbeat, colorful, spiritual, and some of the advice, yeah, is good, but then it's like some of it you're like, this is a show, right? Like a lot, I shouldn't even say some of it, a lot of it was, but you get, they attracts people who are vulnerable and who need guidance and help, and lining up for this person who just talked for an hour, who made to me no sense, lining up to get their autograph from, so Fellini was really on to something.
And yeah, I mean, now everyone and their mother's a life coach, not to knock it, but like, all you have to do to become a life coach is to say that you're one on your Instagram,
Right. Yeah,
Where's
exactly.
coming from, it's fascinating. Catholic history, Christian history, the desert fathers of Egypt, you're talking from roughly the year 300 to 400. Again, these are places that were indigenously Christian, building the early church. And before there was a tradition of a monastic tradition, you had, particularly in Egypt, these people who weren't even necessarily priests yet, but also priests, separating themselves into the desert, sometimes during persecution, sometimes not, to live a contemplative life of asceticism. And that drew people who were hungry for something more than what their lives were. And that's a real thing. And I assume that these people, and there were desert mothers as well, weren't going into the desert to sell something. Otherwise, they really didn't do it well. So there is something out there that people want more, in a sense.
Right.
I mean, what would Juliet of the Spirits be now? It would be everywhere.
Yeah.
Voices you're hearing. So that's
Right.
a fascinating aspect of humanity. And I would be really interested in seeing a take on that now in 2024.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, he manages to poke fun at these things and Catholicism, but at the same time, I mean, him and his wife were both really believed in spirits and the supernatural. So clearly, you see that he takes those things seriously. I know I had mentioned the screenwriters off the top, but I just realized I also forgot to mention. One of the other ones is Brunello Rondi. But as I said to you before we started recording, because I'm sort of being harder on myself to talk more about the collaborators. In Fellini's case, as I said to you, I had heard from one of his biographers, John Baxter, that he had said you should really take the screenwriters as a grain of salt, because he worked in such an organic way. Like, he would go to these writers and just bounce ideas off them. So I don't know who was writing what, and then he was rewriting a lot on the set. So it's kind of hard to tell. And I read over the summer, I don't know if you read the book "I'm a Born Liar," of the Fellini book. It's interviews.
I saw the documentary years ago, but I didn't.
I saw it too, and he was asking him a lot about his process. And honestly, it's hard to understand what he's saying. I had a hard time I was like, and I'm like, well, yeah, of course it's hard to understand. I mean, his films are I mean, you can understand them, but they're hard. They're challenging in a good way. And I honestly couldn't really get what he was getting. A lot of it, I mean, it's so organic and it's so sort of spiritual, and he would do all these things in order to just really be in the present and follow his instincts and, from his dreams. And it's hard to understand. His process is you cannot map. It's not like Hitchcock, not to criticize Hitchcock, but it's just a different kind of style where you can map out every shot, everything. It's like it's like architecture. You can blueprint it. You can't do that with Fellini. It's so organic. I mean,
that's why I marvel at, not to knock Fellini. He's one of my favorite directors. He was one of the most influential directors on me growing up. But I think that's also why sometimes he could get lost later on in his career. Why someone like a Mike Leigh just astounds me, that you're workshopping this stuff in an organic way. You talk about Reddit with people, whereas, like, this is not fair, but I imagine Fellini, smoking something in a circle of people and maybe getting drunk, a semi-orgy even, that he feels really guilty about, but he really likes it. And then as he's falling asleep that night, I got to put this in a movie,
Right.
Is that going to pay off sometimes? I'm sure. Obviously it did. But sometimes you're just going to be self-absorbed, I guess, and recycle some of the same stuff. I feel really bad that I've brought that up so much, but the older you get, the more you see things that are removed, and you try to figure out the artists, particularly the ones that you respect so much, what made them tick and made them do what they did.
Yeah, over the summer, because there was actually here in Toronto a fantastic Fellini exhibition. This gentleman who is from here, and he worked for many years at our news, one of our major news stations, City TV. He bought I don't know if he bought everything that belonged to Fellini, but he bought basically everything that was in his office, all his artifacts, his desk, his headshots above his desk, like all the faces of Fellini. And he's got lots of plans. And I interviewed him. I could put the link in the description box if anyone's interested. It was funny because I showed up with a black and white striped shirt and a fedora on purpose, because I was like, I'm going to do a video. And he thought I was one of the performers there. Because he's like, are you here to do the Fellini performance? And I'm like, no, I'm just dressed for the occasion. You know? But but it really inspired me to watch all of his movies, because after 8.5, I had only seen Satir, and I only just saw Satyricon in June, which I reviewed. I had only seen Satyricon, and I think that was it after 8.5, and I went through all of them, you know, and I still have is it Ginger and Fred? Yeah, Ginger and Fred left, but you know, that's a whole other discussion of his work after. I mean, I liked some more than others, but I can understand some of the, you know, maybe, you know, problems people have or criticisms with with some of them. I know you got to go very, very soon. You got about 4 minutes. Was there anything else you wanted to say about the film?
I criticize so much of it. I think that, again, Fellini has a wonderful sense of movement, a wonderful sense of camera.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the use, you know, it's more, I think people make a big deal, it being his first color feature, and it's like, wow, but it's more than a stunt. I think it really is. And the colors, you get your money's worth just on the beautiful tapestry of shapes and colors, but also his use of shadow with those colors, and his movement is really beautiful. I think that he is a sensual shooter. I think, like Wong Kar-wai also is. I think Hitchcock actually was a very sensual use of a camera, and I think that's really cool. I mean, to think of a set where you're playing live music all the time, and sometimes in step with the music, I wonder what the experience would be like as an actor. I guess.
Yeah, I was wondering that as well.
Or Terrence Stamp. But I'm not someone that is upset because I didn't see in a movie what I wanted to see, but I would have liked to have seen not a bow, but a resolution, in the sense that he's not a plane that isn't going anywhere. I would have liked to see that he is going to land somewhere, and maybe he's at peace with that, but not quite as open-ended. I feel like, especially Giulietta, Marcello too, but especially Giulietta, deserve more than that. And that's a really downer to end it on for a movie that I thought was really pretty good. But I would love to see it re-released and see what the public thinks of it now.
Well, you know, I know we only have a couple of minutes, but I can understand why Giulietta Masina thought that the ending was saying, "Oh, I'm cast off to be alone and abandoned," and he saw it more as, "No, you're free and that you can breathe." And so I guess people can look at both as a possibility, which, you know, the beauty of ambiguity. But for me, I think the fact that if she can now breathe, that's a great step. You know, so whether that goes into a disaster or not, or maybe something
true.
more.
You know, maybe both are true. She's free to breathe. She's also,
but now she's alone, right? No,
and you can do something with that. It's better.
Yeah,
than
exactly.
Better than a ball and chain. You know.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Whereas if you look at something like Wanda ends really like where she's alone, and it's still pretty bad. You know, but at least this I felt had, you know, a sense of hope.
Interesting quote visually with this and 8.5. He also he heads into a forest, but that's to go inside and get lost, whereas she is outside and free. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. If people want to follow you, Joe, on social media, see I know you're working on a film now in post. Where's the best place for them to go?
The best place would be our YouTube and our Instagram, which are both Zio Chicho Cinema.
Great. Fantastic. And I will leave the link in the description box below for where you can follow Joe on social media and YouTube and hear updates about his film, which he's discussed in the past on other videos. I know we're short on time, so I won't ask you to go into that, but you've gone into it before, which is great. But I know you update people there, so people could check it out and go from there. So Joe, thanks again, and look forward to having you back. Of course, we'll do another one down the road.
Thanks, Rob. Can't wait.
Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link, patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is exclusive content that I create month in and month out. And as a subscriber, you are able to vote on polls and contribute to what I do on Patreon month in and month out. So head over to the link for full details. You can also leave a donation directly to my YouTube channel by pressing the thanks link, which you will find directly below the video frame. Just click on the thanks link and you can leave a donation there if you choose to. And lastly, if this is your first time here, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner. To your top left in just a second, just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes. Also click the like button and leave a comment below. Let me know what you think of this episode. Also, you can also share the episode. All of these things are what produce traction to my YouTube channel. So I appreciate you watching and thank you again. And I will see you in the next episode.